We'll start with weeds, and then we'll get to the other. What is a weed? Very simple definition, right? A plant that's out of place. Well, once a year, me and other turf weed scientist nerds get together at our national conference in the Society of the Weed Science Society of America, and we sit around and we talk about killing weeds. And the society has an official definition of what a weed is, right? And I really like it because it says it's objectionable or interferes with the activities or welfare of man. Dr. Alan York was my weed science professor at North Carolina State University. Interfering with human activities. And that's important because in row crops or in wheat, in corn, in soybeans, why are weeds bad in those? Yes, it takes nutrients. It keeps your crop from growing. It reduces the yield. And when it reduces the yield, it reduces what? How much money you make. That's right. Also reduces the amount of food that's going out to everybody else too. We don't really care about that in turf, do we? I know a lot of people in here would rather not mow their lawn. So we're really not caring about yield, you know? What weeds are in turf are unsightly. They're disrupting the uniformity of that turf, okay? This is a bent grass putting green, but it shows perfect what annual bluegrass does in bent grass putting green. It's unsightly. This is not also unsightly, but now that's bumpy. And I guarantee if they tried to play the Ryder Cup on that, every one of them would have been really, really mad because it's unpredictable of what's going to happen. So it's unsightly. It can disrupt uniformity. It's a safety issue. What if you have bindweed, goat head, sandburr on playgrounds? You know, now kids are in areas where weeds are interfering with their activities and cause them to trip or fall or cut their arm. They did a study at University of Tennessee, and they kept weeds out of an area, and then they let weeds grow in another area, and the soil was so hard in the area that the weeds were in that it's now a safety issue with concussions and falling on the ground. Okay? So that's why we definitely want to keep weeds out of it. For home lawns, you got kids playing, you got animals, things like that. But weeds, you can see going 70 miles an hour down the road. Yellow nutsedge grows so fast, you can mow your yard, and the next day it's sticking up above. And I call it the 70-mile-an-hour weed. You're going to be going 70 miles an hour. So then your eye is now pulled to that weed, and you don't see your flowers, your shrubs, your trees, and the other great parts of the landscape. So, disruption of turf uniformity. Most important, you want to identify your weed. I'm going to kind of go through these just real quick because we're going to hit on these. If you know what weed it is, it's actually telling you something that's probably going on under the soil that you did not know. There's things called indicator weeds. Weeds actually can speak to you and tell you things. So, indication of cultural problem. It can, once you identify a weed, you can go to the book and you can look up what life cycle it is. That's going to tell you how to treat it. It's also going to tell you a variation in response to herbicides. If you misidentify crabgrass and goosegrass, you go buy the wrong product. Now you've wasted time, you've wasted money, and you still have the weed. Life cycle, flowering, and seed production. If you know what weed you have, you know the life cycle, annual, perennial. If it's a perennial, you know when it flowers. You can look all this stuff up in the book. So you know the best time to treat that weed is when it's trying to store energy, not when it's flowering. Otherwise, you have a very expensive herbicide deflowering agent, is what I call it. Impress your friends and neighbors. I like that one. That one's my favorite one. People think you're smart if you know weeds. I mean, really. And it's not really that, it's not difficult. We're going to figure out how to identify them and go with there. And save time and money. Misidentifying weeds gets you down the wrong path, gets you the wrong control measure, which wastes time and then is going to waste money. And you're still going to have that same problem at the very beginning, at the end. So, what do we have here? So one of those weeds in the picture is foxtail. It's a summer annual weed. It's very common in the landscape. Another picture is little barley. It's also an annual, but it's a winter annual. They're both grasses. They're both going to be treated by pre-emerge herbicides. But if you misidentified it, you would put your pre-emerge herbicide down at the wrong time, and you would still have the weed. For example, little barley is going to germinate right about now. So if you wanted to treat little barley with a pre-emerge herbicide, you'd have to put it on now. For green foxtail, you want to treat it in March and April timeframe. So if you misidentify, you say that you have green foxtail, and you're putting down a pre every year, you're going to keep having little barley year after year after year type of thing. So that's why it's important to identify. And it's also going to point you in a direction of a long-term solution. Okay, you ready for this? If you see yellow nut sedge or knotweed, that's an indication of some type of flooded soil. May not be right on the surface, maybe underneath the surface where you're holding water. You may have an irrigation leak. It may be a drainage ditch. Something is going on in that area where turf cannot grow in flooded soils like here, but these weeds will grow. So it's an identification. Long-term weed control solution for this would then be, let's get that water out of there. Let's figure out how we can reduce the flooding, whether we need a slotted drain tile. Maybe our irrigation head is broke. We know it watered last night, but we don't really know where it watered. Maybe it was just trickling out the end and flooding this one area. So that's going to treat you long-term weed control. White clover. White clover is a very common weed, and it's indicating a moist, infertile soil. Okay? Anybody know anything about clovers and what they do? Makes its own nitrogen, exactly right. So if it's in a turfgrass system with low fertility, it's going to thrive. The turf is not getting enough fertility that it needs to sustain its growth, but it's in a system where the clover can now thrive and grow. Long term for this is just maintain the fertility the turf needs to then be a healthy turf to outcompete. But what happens when you fertilize a plant that fixes its own nitrogen? It doesn't necessarily kill it, but it confuses it. It doesn't know whether to make its own nitrogen or not. It says, there's nitrogen there. Why am I making nitrogen? Well, I'm going to make nitrogen. No, I'm not. Yeah, I am. No, I'm not. And so it confuses it. So you got a two punch there. You're maintaining a healthy turf about correct fertility, and you're also confusing that weed. You might need a short-term solution of a control measure, but long-term, maintain the health of the turf. This is a perfect example of it, fertilizing properly. I got two indicators when I look at that it's low fertility. What are they? We just talked about one. Well, all right, that's one of them. Color. Yeah, the grass is chlorotic. It's yellow. It doesn't look very good. So that's indicating that it's low fertility. And then there is a bunch of clover in there. Now, when we talk about indicator weeds, just because you have one weed right here doesn't indicate that there is a massive problem going on. Because weeds are crazy and they'll grow anywhere, okay? But when you typically have uniform stands like this over a broad area, that's going to indicate a problem. The green areas out there, properly fertilized, you don't have as much clover in that area. Compacted soils, goosegrass. Perfect indicator of compacted soil. Next to driveways, sidewalks, turf cannot grow in really compacted soils, but goosegrass can. So long-term weed control solution for this would be what? Aerate, exactly. You might need something to get rid of it this year, but if you aerate, you're going to improve the health of your turf, the health of your soil, and you have less probability or you'll have less pressure put on your other control measure by maintaining a healthy turf. There's a whole bunch of them in here. Dry soils, low, shade, compacted soils. Shade is kind of one of the no-brainers. You can see the shade, so you don't need a weed to tell you that there's shade there all the time. But alkaline, acidic soils. Alkaline soils, we talked about plantain. That's definitely a good indicator that your pH is wrong, that you need to work on your pH and get it right. So, but obviously, the best weed control is healthy turf. Weeds are the result of an unhealthy turf, not the cause. You have weeds because the turf is not healthy. You don't have weeds. The weeds are the result of an unhealthy turf. They're not the cause. Your turf doesn't look bad because you have weeds. Your turf was bad, and then you got the weeds, is what happened. So here's a perfect example of a healthy growing zoysia grass system, properly mown, properly fertilized, out-competing this crabgrass invasion around it. So a great example of that. So to maintain a healthy lawn, we talked about fertility, irrigation, mowing. We know that the height of mowing is crucial. I'll hit that real quick. This is research that I did at North Carolina State University. I actually seeded crabgrass. Okay? We put crabgrass in to make sure that we had enough crabgrass population, so it was like worst case scenario. Don't worry too much about it other than we mowed it at 1, 2, 3, and 4 inches. Look at the trend. This is just percent crabgrass. We had little to no crabgrass in 3 to 4 inches. All right? This is not saying mow your grass at 4 inches, because there's also repercussions of mowing it at 4 inches too. But if you put a pre-emerge herbicide out to maintain crabgrass, is it easier to control a 15% population or a 65% population? A 15%. So now if we do the correct fertility, the correct mowing, watering, what we're doing is we're putting less pressure on our herbicides to do the job that they're supposed to do. And then if we do the incorrect things and we put a herbicide down, we're putting too much pressure on it, and then we blame the herbicide for not doing its job when technically we didn't do our job as a turfgrass manager of maintaining a healthy turf, and then letting those products help us continue to maintain that turf healthy. Here's a perfect example. That's 1 inch, man. That's covered in crabgrass. And then the 3 inches right there. All right. So there's indicators of what's going on. We want to maintain it healthy. So what kind of weeds do you have? All right. I like to break them up into 3 groups: broadleafs, sedges, and grasses. It's as simple as that, guys. There's different products that do broadleafs, there's different products that do sedges, and there's different products that control grasses. Once you know that, you can just go to that library of information and use those products out there. The same thing that you try to kill a sedge with might not kill that broadleaf. Something that you might try to kill a grass with might not kill that sedge. So there's like sections of types of herbicides there to kill them. So right now, the trend in the industry is let's just mix it all in a bottle. Okay? Let's just put it all together, have one jug, and it's the take all. That's all you need to kill all the weeds that are out there. So you think you got one big hammer. What's the problem with that? If you don't need it, don't put it out. Every time one of these active ingredients go in it, the price goes up. And we're not talking like price of fertilizer going up. We're talking drastic prices when it comes to the herbicide industry, especially for ones that work. So reality, you have a lot of little hammers. Fill your toolbox with hammers, not a gigantic hammer type of thing. So before we get into it, I'm going to go through this super, super quick, because this is like the terminology you need to know about herbicides, okay? This is really important because it really shows that, you know, what's a pre, what's a post, what's a systemic, what's not a systemic, because those are going to be the ones that determine what you use and how you kill your weeds. So, first of all, every bag has got a different name. It's just like fertilizer, right? Every bag is going to be called something different. Every herbicide is going to be named something different. What you want to know is the active ingredient. This one, the trade name is Trimec. The active ingredient is listed on the bag. You have common names. Don't worry about the common name. And definitely don't worry about this chemical name down here. Okay? That's only for like chemists. They could draw that compound based on this right here. And I've done that way too much, and I don't ever want to do that again. So I said I'm never looking and reading one of those anymore. But this is the important thing, the active ingredient, okay? Quiz. What is the trade name of this product? Roundup. What is the active ingredient? Glyphosate. You got it. All right. That is the bacon, the eggs, the biscuits. All right? This is the grits. You never pay for grits in a Southern breakfast, but it always shows up on your table. Okay? That's exactly what that is. You pay for the bacon, you pay for the sausage, you pay for the eggs, you pay for the biscuits, but the grits always shows up. I've had good grits, and I've had some really bad grits too. This other ingredients is what makes this product 30-minute rain-fast warranty guaranteed ready, okay? But it's the active ingredient that kills that plant, all right? So that's what you were looking for. All right. Then you have two different kinds of herbicides. You have a pre, and you have what's called a post, all right? Pre-emerge herbicides are applied to the soil surface prior to weed germination. So these are what you would want for annual grasses. Annual grasses come back from what every year? Seed. So if we stop the seed, we stop the weed, okay? Pre-emerge herbicides also cannot tell the difference between the seed you're wanting to seed, good seed, and bad seed. It only knows seed. All right. So if you apply it before it emerges, does it kill the seeds? It's a pre-emergent herbicide. Okay, so it doesn't actually kill the seed or kill it before it germinates. Pre-emerge herbicides actually are applied to the soil and they stick on the soil surface and they just hang out there. Your weed seeds that are then in the soil grow a shoot and grow a root, and they hit that barrier, they soak it up, and then they die. So it's before it actually emerges from the soil is how it kills it. So that's why some of them, there's pre-emerge herbicides called barricade, because it makes a barrier on the surface. So that's how pre-emerge herbicides work. Post-emerge herbicides are applied after they germinate, okay? So if you already have crabgrass, you already have dandelions, then that's what you would apply to get rid of them after that they've germinated. Now you have selective and non-selective. A lot of terminology here. Selective just means it kills what you want it to kill and not your turf that you want to keep, okay? So selective, the difference between sometimes killing your turf and not killing your turf is how much you put in that jug or in your sprayer or your rate. 1 glug is good, 2 glugs is not always better. So anyways, and then non-selective just means it kills everything that it touches. And then you have systemic and contact. Contact's really simple. It just means it's only going to kill what it touches. Systemic means it's going to move through the plant. It's going to kill the rhizomes. It's going to try to kill the stolons. It's going to try to kill the stuff. It's going to move and help kill it. It's going to kill it in the root. That's what they, say on the TV. You want one to kill the root. You don't want it to kill only the leaves because then it come back from the root. The question was, when you're seeding grass, can you put a weed preventer down? If it's a pre-emergent, you cannot, because the pre-emerge herbicide does not know the difference between the grass you're seeding and then the weed seeds that are in the ground. So that's why we seed fescue in the fall, because we don't have to worry about crabgrass germinating right now, okay? If we seeded it in the spring, crabgrass is going to germinate at the same time, but we can't put a crabgrass preventer down because we want the fescue to grow too. So that's why we like to seed in the fall with that. All right, real quick, broadleaf sedges and grasses. Broadleaf weeds have square stems, round stems, all sorts of stems. Their leaves are more like an oak leaf or an ornamental plant type. They're going to be very broad. The veins are going to be networked in the leaves, okay? And it can have all sorts of types of different roots. We're not even going to get into it. Dandelion has a big tap root on it, okay? For example, grasses have round stems, linear leaves like a sword. The veins are parallel in the leaf blades, and it has fibrous root systems. And then sedges. Sedges have edges. It's going to have a triangular stem. If you pick it up, you rotate it through your stem or look down it, it's going to be a perfect triangle. So that's how you identify broadleaf grasses and sedges. Some broadleaf weeds are henbit. This is one that's getting ready to start coming on right now. It is a, winter annual weed. Flowers October to May, starts to germinate September through March. So it germinates all winter long. All right. My clicker break. Common chickweed. This is another winter annual weed that you'll see starting to germinate right now. It is an annual. It's going to be flatter to the ground, prostrate. It's got little heart-shaped leaves kind of on it. There's common chickweed, mouse ear chickweed. It's all different types of chickweeds, but these are examples of broadleaf weeds. Here's one that we've already talked about, white clover. Identifying characteristics of it are one, the white flower, but it has these round trifoliate leaves on it, but it typically has this white circle in the middle, okay? That's the way you tell that different from this, which is oxalis or yellow wood sorrel. It's going to have a yellow flower, and its leaves are heart-shaped, and it doesn't have that circle, okay? Real important because the same active ingredient does not kill this that will kill clover, even though they look the same. Look very similar, two different weeds. Dandelions, probably the most common broadleaf weed that's out there, right? You can identify it by the jagged leaves, the yellow flowers. It's everywhere right now, and it's a perennial. That's what makes it tough to kill. It comes back from that taproot year after year after year. So, to determine when you kill it, if you know it, the life cycle of that perennial plant, you can determine what's the best time of the year to kill it, okay? So what is going on during the year? In the wintertime, the dandelion just sits there. Springtime, it's sending the energy to its leaves to grow new leaves. In the summertime, it wants to flower, so it sends those flowers up to the top. And then in the fall, it's taking the energy back down to the roots because it knows it's got to hibernate for the winter. In the wintertime, it sits there. So when is the best time to treat this weed to try to get rid of it? Fall. The question was, now we're seeding. Can we still kill dandelions? If you time it, you can. So what you'd want to do, most of these broadleaf herbicides that are out here, if you've seeded and once you got it up, once you've mowed it maybe 2 or 3 times, the label will say wait until you've mowed it 3 times maybe, or wait till 2 weeks after emergence, then you can apply that product. If you haven't seeded yet, a lot of these products are going to say apply and wait at least 2 weeks before seeding. So that's why you would do that. So broadleaf weed control, dandelions, thistles, clovers, what we got. Post-emergence are usually best. Definitely when they're actively growing is going to kill them better because it's going to move that herbicide in with them. So what are the best ones? There's all sorts of them out here, okay? 2,4-D, MCPP, dicamba, fluoxapyr, capirolid, triclopyr. The list goes on and on and on. Most importantly, when you're looking at broadleaf weed control, you want to look for what's called a 3-way, okay? It's got more than one of these active ingredients in it. For example, let's look at wild violet. 2,4-D does not work really good on wild violet, but it works really good on common dandelion. Most of the time when you have broadleaf weeds, you don't have just the one broadleaf weed. You have these other ones in there as well. So use the 3-way or the trimec is what they're kind of said to do those. So it's got multiple active ingredients in them. Yeah, capirolid and actually another one, quinclorac that's in Drive. You want to make sure that every time, first of all, you always read the label and you follow the directions on every label, and there's going to be precautions on every label. This label in Drive or quinclorac is going to say, do not mulch or use clippings in flower beds or in gardens because it stays in the clippings a little bit. It doesn't break down, so then if you put it on it, then it'll kill your tomatoes type of thing. It'll say wait for 3 mowings before collecting clippings, and then you can do that type of thing. So you always read every label and abide by the law. The broadleaf herbicides, these are ones that you can spot apply. You can broadcast them, you can spot apply them. You can do either whichever way. If you've got only some over here, ain't no need to treat the entire yard, just treat that one area that has them type of thing. So they're only going to kill what it contacts. Where a pre-emerge herbicide, that's going to go after these grasses, you would want to broadcast over the entire yard because you want to produce that barrier that's on that yard. So for example, we're just going to go through them quick. Crabgrass, early germinator. It's going to come in when the soil gets 55 degrees every year, germinates from seed. That's when the forsythias and redbuds bloom. Okay? So when you know that, that's the time to put your crabgrass pre-emerge. You got smooth, you got large. Then you have another annual grass called goosegrass. It looks very similar to crabgrass. Way you tell it different, it has a wagon wheel white type of appearance or middle. It's flatter. It germinates later than crabgrass, but you apply your crabgrass preventer to then help with your goosegrass because it germinates later. So your pre-emerge herbicides are the ones that are going to go after these. Like I said, they're both summer annuals, later germinating. So for summer annual grasses, pre-emerge herbicides are going to prevent them because they're going to grow throughout the entire summer. They're not going to come up in one flush and then die. Does that make sense? So if you didn't put a pre-emerge herbicide down, which you put it usually down around April, March, or May, when the redbuds or forsythias bloom, and this shifts year to year. This year in Manhattan was way later. On the west side of Kansas, it was way earlier than normal. So it shifts from year to year. Look at your redbuds and forsythias. That's going to indicate where it's at. And then it's going to prevent all these crabgrass. But if you don't put a preventer down, you can use post-emerge herbicides. But it's only going to kill what's emerged. It's not going to prevent anything else from emerging. So some of your pre-emerge herbicides are going to be like Barricade, Dimension, pendimethalin. It's also called Prowl. Teams Scott's fertilizer plus Halts. There's a lot of them out there. So look at the bag that says Crabgrass Preventer. Okay? We talked about weed and feeds earlier. Weed and feeds could be anything on a fertilizer. It could be a post-emergent. It could be a pre-emergent. So make sure you look and see what weeds they're targeting. If it's a pre-emerge, it'll typically say Crabgrass Preventer. Post-emerge, it's going to say broadleaf or dandelion type of killer. So anyways, you want to put those off and get them. But what if you didn't get a pre-out for crabgrass? What do you do now? There's a good product called Drive. The active ingredient is quinclorac. That's the meat that you want to get. Sometimes it's not. It might just be called quinclorac on the shelf. It might just be called something else. So you want to put this out. But it's crazy. It's really weird. It works on small crabgrass up to 1-tiller crabgrass and then bigger than 4-tiller crabgrass. Everybody know what a tiller is? All right. Tiller is a fancy word for a stem. Okay? So as a grass plant grows, it produces a stem. It has leaves come off of that stem. Then it produces another stem, and then it has leaves come off of it. So it's just a fancy word for a tiller. So it's kind of how a bunch type grass produces more, where like zoysia, the fescue, the Bermuda would produce the rhizomes and stolons. It only makes it in bunches right there. So once you get to the 1 to 4-tiller stage, it's real finicky. I don't know what it is about this ingredient, but it doesn't work really well. So because crabgrass is going to emerge all summer long, if you catch it early in the year, you can put it out and also put another pre on, or put a pre in with it, so then you get the pre-emerge for the rest of the summer. If you got big crabgrass, it's usually later in the season. You don't want to put a pre-emerge on it then, because soon enough you'll be doing what? Seeding. Exactly. So then you only want to try to clean it up to get rid of it beforehand. Now, if you misidentified crabgrass and you actually got goosegrass and you put Drive or quinclorac on, it's not going to work. It doesn't work at all. That's why it's really important to determine what weed that you actually have in your lawn. So, all right, sedges. Sedges are really simple. Sedges have edges. The reason they're hard to control is because they have tubers. All right. This sedge plant here that has a triangular stem, this is yellow nut sedge. It's the one that grows up above the canopy of all the grasses. It's connected by rhizomes to another one. It may be connected to another tuber. Another tuber may just be by itself. But those tubers are like gigantic seeds. Some of them can be the size of marbles. Okay? That means there's a lot of energy in that tuber to break through the soil. It means it can stay sleeping for a very, very, very long time, for 10, 15 years. But then don't know exactly how it works. There's no brain in this plant. But if you attack this one plant with something, it does send some hormones and chemicals through that tuber to another, or through that rhizome to another tuber and says, I'm under attack. You got to start growing. Who's ever pulled nut sedge and then you've ended up having more nut sedge after you ended up pulling it? So that's what it does. So you definitely want a systemic type of herbicide to kill that. There's two out there for yellow nut sedge. One is called the sedge hammer. Okay? The active ingredient's halosulfuron, but just look for sedge hammer. And then there's another one called sulfentrazone is the active ingredient, and it can be contained in a lot of various different products. Sulfentrazone actually claims to kill the tubers. So it's going to move down the plant and kill the tubers as well. All right. Sedge hammer works really well. It won't injure the turf. With sedge hammer or dismiss, you're probably going to have to do it more than once. Weed control a lot of times is a more than once thing. Spoon feed it a little bit, injure it, and then spoon feed it to kill it off. Instead of trying to kill it too much at one time, then it kills it too fast and it doesn't get down to the tubers and kills up. Mid-September, nut sedge starts to go dormant. If you got it up and you want to get rid of it, try and get rid of it. The smaller it is, the easier it is to control, but it's going to grow throughout the entire summer. So you're probably going to have to spot apply a couple times throughout the summer. September, mid-September, October, it's going to not start germinating new stuff, so you're not going to see it. But you're not going to need to worry about it until the next year. So I'm going to skip over that. Common post-emerge herbicides, 2,4-D, Trimec. I'll let you look through those. Sedge hammer, dismiss. There's a whole bunch of them out there when it comes to herbicides. All right. We've actually run out of time, and I know we didn't get to diseases or weeds. So that is in there. Diseases, take-home message. Just maintain your turf as best as you can. Water in the mornings and not the evenings to reduce the environmental impact. Insects, make sure you go to church on Sunday and tell them not to pray and not to infect your yard. So